Hello and welcome, DFW Networking Diva, Christine Deane here, and we are excited. I love connecting you to people that you should know. So today we have an awesome guest, and we're just going to blow your mind today. So if you like entrepreneurship, then this is the place that you want to play because we've got SJ in the house. Woo. Hey, SJ.
Well, hello. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. When we were talking last time, and I was like, ooh, we got to bring you on the show because you are all about everything entrepreneurship. Not just your old grandpa style entrepreneurship, but this, you like to call it what? Futurepreneur? Is that?
That is one definition, and it wasn't my original creation of the term, but when I learned that you can marry futurism and entrepreneurship, smack it together in a Venn diagram, Christine, it's like, that's me. So here I am.
So you're going to have to explain. So what is futurism? And then we understand the concept of entrepreneurship, but what does that mean when you put it together? So talk to us.
All right. Like anything else, there's different definitions. It's going to depend on your frame of reference. It's going to depend on your worldview. It's going to depend on your values, the whole bit. But here is one way I'll describe it. Futurism, in a nutshell, says that you have the mindset of looking over the hill, over the dell, over the mountain, around the mountain, to what's already there, what's coming, that others just haven't seen yet. Okay? It's sort of like before mass adoption, let's pretend that we are in the 1880s, roughly. You might have seen or heard that people were working on this newfangled thing called a motorized carriage. It's like, ooh, a motorized carriage. What does that mean? I've been riding a horse and buggy for 20 years, 25 years, 50 years, right? Or I just went on a locomotive, right? What's a motorized carriage? Well, the futurism would have been like, you're more inclined to be very curious, to be very, so maybe a little bit counterintuitive, and basically open to new experiences. That is what someone in the 1880s roughly would have said about the motorized carriage. Tell me more, Christine. Tell me more. What is this thing? What have you heard? What's in the New York Times? What's, back then, the paper of record back then, what's in the local paper, right? Well, futurism now with the mass adoption of the internet is a whole heck of a lot easier because things spread so fast that when new things come out, like the latest NFT or the latest development in Web 3.0 or another new autonomous vehicle startup, these things spread much faster. But our attention span is it's way more diverse and way more dispersed now that you still may miss something. So the futurist can also be a guide saying, here's what I know is a trend or a new business concept or a new model or a new app or something. So that, in a definition, in a nutshell, is futurism.
Right. So if you're excited about new things, you want to find out what's going on, you always want to be up on the latest, greatest, that kind of stuff, then you probably want to embrace this whole concept of the future, right? But at the same time, you have your futurepreneur. So when we combine that together, now what do we have?
We have a pretty potent mix because entrepreneurship, in one way of defining it, is kinetic or kinesthetic energy. You're in motion, you're doing things, you're producing value, you're producing a product, a service, or you're transmuting knowledge, as Napoleon Hill taught us, specialized knowledge. It's in motion, it's kinetic, it's kinesthetic. So now you combine that with futurism, you literally are almost like launching a rocket to a faraway planet. because
I love this.
you're taking two things that are already more, they're very immersive. They're very intuitive. They're very much exciting. They're empowering. They're almost intoxicating. And you've now put them together. You've created a Venn diagram. You've gone beyond directional innovation in many cases to intersectional innovation. And that is what the iPhone did in 2007, for example. And it completely, over a short time frame, Christine, obliterated BlackBerry. It obliterated RIM because it was intersectional. So now you merge futurism with entrepreneurship. I see that as intersectional innovation, and it can obliterate old school bureaucracies, old school status quo. And I love to do that. That's just the way I think anyway. So it's like status quo, be gone, bring on futurism, and bring on entrepreneurial excitement.
Well, so if you don't like change, then this is not the podcast for you. Disappear, go away. You just sign out now, because we're all about change, innovation, things that are new, how to get excited, how to get involved in things. And I really think that's what you bring to this table, which is awesome, right? Because you're consciously doing it. Some people become accidental entrepreneurs, right? Like, oh, well, this is interesting. And then they end up going that direction. But entrepreneurship really is a mindset, right? It's thinking about what are the opportunities before me, right? I don't know about you, but I was raised with you go to school, you get a degree, you work for someone else, and that's what you do. My background is teaching college, right? So I have a great respect for education, but at the same time, that's not the only option out there. We have all sorts of fun opportunities. So I know you consider yourself a futurepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, how did you get down that path of entrepreneurship? Has it always been there, or did you wake up one day and go, aha, I see the light?
I believe it was a seed in need of water, sunshine, and fertile soil. Here's what I mean. Growing up, as I did, I'm a Gen Xer. For your audience, I'm a Gen Xer. And if you have no idea what all the generations stand for, brackets about when we were born or whatever, feel free to look it up. But a Gen Xer, as a Gen Xer, I did most of my growing up, and I'll give you a little hint here before you even look anything up. I did most of my growing up as a kid in the 80s. That might make me feel extremely old to you, or maybe like, hey, you're my brother. Good to see you, Mr. Xer, right? But as I was doing that, my father had already been in business for over a decade. He had a business of his own. He called it self-employed, which I still believe is a term that can still work in the modern age, because until we continue to morph these old styles, bureaucratic institutions, and a lot of the old lingo, calling it self-employed is still a valid term, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what he called himself, Christine, is my father called himself self-employed. In the modern day, we might also call it a solopreneur. We might call it a sole proprietor. Either way, as I'm growing up in the 80s, before the internet went mainstream, cable was rolling out, et cetera, my father was supporting my mom and I, because I'm the only child, strictly on income coming in through his own business endeavor. So the seed was already there. However, he hit a rough patch. He had already made it through, I think, 2 recessions or 3. But this third or fourth one finally hit him, and he couldn't see a path forward. So he sold the business to one of his competitors. This was when I was in high school now, in the early 90s. So therefore, the seed was there. Mm-hmm. It just needed sunlight. It needed water, fresh water, and it needed fertile soil. And then a number of years later, it received those, but it took a while
Mm-hmm.
from the early 90s until the early 2010s. So about 20 years. I'm doing the math right in my head. I was either in a classroom or I was working for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of my journey,
Mm-hmm.
but my ultimate destiny, if you will, the seed growing, came about 20 years after my father sold out. And then it went from there. And all credit to my very first mentor, Terry, with a Y, a gentleman in this case. He's the one that drew it out of me as a mentor. So there you go.
Yeah, I really think there's different paths to that entrepreneurship, whether you're not happy in your workplace, you want something different. Maybe you're tired of having a boss that dictates what you do, or maybe tired of, they think of it as stable employment, but how stable is it? Because how long do people actually stay in a job nowadays? Right. So it's not as stable as you would like to think it is. So it's kind of a misnomer there. But at the same time, right, how are you, do you have to stay in your lane, right? The idea, okay, you might have your main job and then you have a side hustle maybe, right? That we're changing the way we look at that, right? We're no longer saying, okay, this is your main job and this is your side. Well, how many side hustles can you have? At what point do you bridge that from I'm a business owner to and I'm an entrepreneur?
Well, there's a lot there to unpack or unravel. So when I say I met my first mentor in the early 2010s, that's when I started as a gig or hustler myself, right? Because again, been 20 years since my father sold out. He didn't leave me some pool of dollar bills somewhere, right? So I had to start and not completely cut off the pipeline that was taking care of the basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maslow's hierarchy, we can't forget it. Maslow's hierarchy talks about safety and security as basics, right? Bottom of the pyramid, right? Or if you don't believe Maslow intended as a hierarchy, either way, it's the beginning of where you start, right? So that's what sometimes makes people not want to move past it because they're so used to that. But with the mass adoption of the internet, the availability of mentorship, of getting advice, of getting coaching, of getting consultation, of finding support networks, platforms, funding, lifelong learning, professional development, if you will. All of these things are so much easier than if my father, what he faced in 1970 was the first year of his business. So he ended up having it for over 20 years before he sold out. So is there a limit on the number of hustles, gigs, side things? I don't think there is, as long as you break the chain between time and income. Time and money, or time and income, time and currency, however you want to describe it. Break that chain. It was put into you probably from the schooling system, which I might remind your audience, Christine, has its roots in the 1850s.
Well, it's
Okay?
the ancient idea of trading time for money, right?
Exactly. And that had its purpose in the past when you were an industrial or even an agricultural economy, when you were timing the crops for harvest, when you were going to the factory and punching in and putting doors on Henry Ford's vehicles. Fantastic. This is, as we're recording this is late 2023. Why in God's name are we still teaching time for money when that is such an old concept that no longer needs to be interconnected? So that is what I say is once you get past that hurdle, which can be a mental hurdle, it can be a financial hurdle, it can be a social hurdle, it can be a cultural hurdle, all of the above, then you can have 17 side hustles, if you want to call them that, because you can create partnerships and collabs and connect people to resources and such and pocket a little bit of money here and there. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
so that's the story here. It's not about jobs. It's not about careers anymore. It's about proof of work, creating value, helping solve crises that are often created by centralized institutions that are no longer reliable in 2023.
Well, and think about the whole concept of multiple streams of income, right? That used to be like a what? Right? You get a job and then that's your stream of income. What about, right? And then you watch with the pandemic and how some people's businesses did not do well with the pandemic, right? They did not pivot well. Or, I had a friend that was doing concerts and all of a sudden people couldn't meet in groups anymore. Talk about total pivot on the business model, right? So multiple streams of income now more than ever, right? You got to think about how are you supporting you and your family, and one stream may not be all that you want. You probably want multiple options. And really, whether that's within a business or whether it's outside your business and you have multiple businesses, it's having that mindset of I want to be part of more, something bigger, right? And it's not like I have to stay in my lane. I can only focus on, get rid of that mindset, right? You can have other areas of interest.
You absolutely can. My Terry, who I already mentioned, one of his earliest lessons for me was at minimum, you need two.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute minimum.
Mm-hmm.
There is no room for one anymore. With maybe if I were to be a little picky with Terry's advice 10 plus years later, I might be able to be picky and say if you are a federal judge or if you're a politician in a gerrymandered district, maybe those are about the only exceptions. But even think about it this way. Even someone who has an amazing skill like a professional athlete, they sign these big contracts. Don't tell me you haven't heard out there in the audience of a contract being terminated or renegotiated or rescinded, things like that, those kind of terms. So even if you have such a unique skill of hitting a baseball 101 miles, 101 mile an hour fastball, 450 feet, or throwing a 70-yard pass in the air, you still shouldn't have one source of income. And these athletes get it because it took so long, but kudos that it finally arrived, the name, image, and likeness policies. It allowed athletes to create a brand that allows them to be very entrepreneurial. That was the missing link, in my view, in professional sports. It allows them a bridge now. So when they do injure their knee or whatever, or they get their contract terminated because of budget issues for the team, they now have a brand and they can go off and have all these sources of income. And at a younger age than before, because the name, image, and likeness is for younger people. If you're already an established athlete like Tom Brady was or something, obviously you probably already had that, right? So that is exactly it. And I thought I would highlight the NIL because that's a real neat thing that I was very happy to see roll out a couple of years ago.
Well, and that brings up a great topic, the idea of branding. Okay, so if you're an entrepreneur, as opposed to I have a business, I'm going to brand my business. I work for this company, I have their brand behind me, right? So how does this tie into the branding space with this whole futurepreneur?
This might be a little bit out there for some people, but as you teased earlier, Christine, this podcast is not for the faint of heart when it comes to transformation and change.
Uh-huh.
So I'm about to maybe burst the bubble here. Maybe. I don't believe that you should be seeking to be a business owner, if you will, or a founder or a CEO or something. I believe you should be looking at creating a brand that transcends that. So on a piece of paper somewhere, you have business A, business B, business X, right? And on another piece of paper, you have collaboration, joint venture, partnership, F, G, and M. So that's fine and dandy. It's on a piece of paper. It's in a cloud somewhere. Eventually, it'll be on a blockchain, right? But more importantly, what is your brand? So when you're asked and you're identifying yourself at some sort of an event or on a bio somewhere, in my view, focus on your brand. That's what I do, because I have my hands in different things. You know, I'm a futurepreneur. Underneath that, I do super connecting. I have many, many partnerships. I do like freelance projects. I do fractional work, things like that. So the brand is what you lead with, in my view. So if you're thinking of an old dance, like the waltz or something, you lead with your left, or I think if you lead with your left, if I remember right. Well, in this case, entrepreneurially, you lead with your left, and the left is your brand.
I love it. And, as a marketer, I do a lot of work with companies and individuals, and you're seeing more and more the need for that personal brand as we think about how long, even those that are working for a company, right? How long do they stay there versus shifting? Or just because you went to school to do something specific, we shift, right? And then we end up with a second career, right? So what do we take with us from place to place? Ourselves, right? Our personal brand goes with us wherever we go, right? And I've been flying under DFW Networking Diva, but at the same time, when you have a pandemic and you can't be as local and you have to do everything online, right? My networking diva status now goes way beyond just Dallas Fort Worth, right? I talk to people internationally on a consistent basis, right? So whether it's national, international, so you can shift. And when it's your personal brand to take with you, those shifts don't matter as much anymore. You go where that energy is, but you see a theme, right? There's probably certain things in a space that you like to play in, right? And I know for me, right, it's get connected with Christine Deane, right? I will connect you with people, resources, power partners, synergy, connect you with your audience through marketing, right? Whatever that is. So I'm all about that connection space also. And as a super connector, I know you feel that.
I do, because I followed a continuum that I think a fair amount of people follow, even if they don't realize it. It might be unconscious or subconscious to them. Here's what I did. I started out when I was Mr. Corporate. I started out, and even this goes back to when I was in the classroom for 17 years. I started out as a consumer. Consume what you need, or what you want, of course, right? Consume, 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 consume. Even past presidents would come out in public and say, don't worry about it. We got under control. You go ahead and consume, right? That's almost your default modality, folks. But then here's where it gets fun. Breaking free and stop fitting in and doing something that matters now, producing something of value. I read the Producer's Manifesto within the first year of being mentored by Terry. And I went from being a consumer to a producer as soon as I read it. The Producer's Manifesto. And then I also read an Entrepreneur's Manifesto and a few others. Then the next step became being a networker. Networking, when done well and done right with the right spirit, the right heart, the right soul, and the right mindset, is a very productive endeavor. The people who say it doesn't work, or they're afraid of it, or it sucks, or any of those kind of negative connotations, they're doing it wrong. They're not doing it for the right reasons. They're still have that consumer mentality, which is where the concept of pit slapping comes from. And I've been pit slapped more in the last week or two than I thought. I thought I already had seen it all, but I've seen so many others. And some of them don't even have anything to do with my polymathic, my multiple ventures that I'm involved in. I'm thinking, can you please do a little bit of work on this? If you want to pit slap me, do a little work, right? So that's networking. Then you can move into connecting, which is now a conscious desire to help other people that you've already met while networking. Hey, Christine, I know someone that you need to know. Hey, Christine, I know an event that I attended that I think you should attend the next time it's available. Hey, Christine, here's a podcast, or here's a white paper you should read, or watch a video or whatever. Then when you take it to the final step, which I believe is super connecting, I haven't found another stage or step past it yet. Super connecting means you do the exact same thing as a connector, but now it's wider and deeper. It's almost like going from 2D to 3D. It's almost like going from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, which, by the way, we're in that transition as we speak. So that is a super connector, and that folds underneath my brand. And it's all about serving, solving, and sharing.
Absolutely. I love those values because that's where my heart is. If you're coming in and you're going into a networking situation with the idea of what can I get out of this, you've already lost. Turn around, go home. And it's a mindset. It really is. And so those, like you said, who aren't finding the success they're looking for in networking aren't doing it right. So they need to team up with some super connectors here, your networking divas, and talk to somebody and find out, what am I doing wrong? Number one, change your mindset, right? If we look at it, we're all on this planet and we all have to exist and coexist together. Let's see what we can do about making the world a better place. And that's kind of my goal, right? Is let's make the world a better place. And it's all about building relationships. So I love that that's your heart and where you're coming from, which leads me to think about how we met, right? We actually met through my B2B network. And so it's, you want to check them out. They're actually the sponsor of this show today. And that's myb2bnetwork.com. And they're a B2B marketplace. So you can go check them out. They've got a bunch of resources on there. It's a list of if you want to provide services or if you're looking for services, it's a great place to go. Great group of professionals over there. So I'm going to do a little plug on that one.
As you should. Because these kind of marketplaces, which I have an economics background, but I was more, for those who are a little bit more, and I hate to use this term, it's so negative, but forgive me, folks, nerdy. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you're a little bit nerdy or geeked out on economics, you know that there's micro and macroeconomics. Macro is a little bit more of the zoom out, a little bit more of the bigger picture. That's me. I was never a big fan of microeconomics when I was in a classroom. I took it. It was a part of my coursework, but I really didn't like it as much. So macroeconomics, what my B2B network is it's a multi-sided platform, an MSP, not a managed service provider. It's a different MSP. Multi-sided platforms are a new kind of economics. There's an entire school now dedicated to it. One of the very first that went mainstream, mass adoption, folks, crossed the chasm, was Airbnb and Uber. They were multi-sided platforms because, hey, you have a vehicle, I need a ride. The multi-sided platform connects you with less friction. They take a percentage of it. Buyer, seller, free enterprise happens, done. You have extra space in your house. You have a vacation home you're only using 2 weeks a year. Someone needs a place to stay. Boom, same thing happens.
So connection services, right? It's all about connection services. So they're taking what networking, but they're doing it in a way that's monetized.
It's a multi-sided platform and 3 winners result. The person who needs something, the person who wants, the person who needs something, the person who has it, and the person who brings them together on the platform, which is meant to be neutral. That's what my B2B network is. And if you look up multi-sided platforms, you look up matchmaker economics. As a futurist, as a futurepreneur, I've been watching matchmaker economics for about 5 years. So glad that they're sponsoring it because I fully love that school of economics, as you can tell.
Right. And that's the idea, is we're bringing the best together, right? I mean, this needs this, and this needs that. That's what we do every day as super connectors. So it's kind of cool that it all fits together, right? It's like, oh, we're doing something magical here.
A puzzle completed, or finishing off as I was. Okay, so here's a little peek into my past. Trivial Pursuit was one of my favorite games. You know how much fun it was to get that sixth and final pie piece into the little circle? And then you went around and answered the final question and you won? That's basically what you got going on here. Is you got all 6 pie pieces from Trivial Pursuit and you've answered the final question. So
that's
anyway,
exactly. Well, so
I'll
favorite
bring up
tool.
some of my
Got you.
80s.
That's okay. We got to date ourselves sometimes. While
That's
we're talking
right.
about cool tools, I'm thinking about, any other cool tools you want to share with us? Because I know we also both of us are on Be Connected, which is another great playground to play. It's kind of the idea, rather than the old school idea where you're trying to get those, as many likes and follows and all that, right? It's just this like, oh, I need to sign in and see how many people liked my Facebook post, right? It's a little bit different than that. It's going to call it social business, which is pretty awesome. We still want to do business with people we know, like, and trust. But it's not so much of the, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's as much of the fan club kind of concept, right? Like, I have all these followers. It doesn't feel that way. You know what I mean? It just feels more authentic.
Well, and it does, because I would put Be Connected into more of a Web 2.5, 3.0 box, or a bucket. It's going past what the 2.0 people saw. So with all respect to the Zuckerbergs and to the I can't remember. Oh, Jack Dorsey, original founder of Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reid Hoffman with LinkedIn. All of those 3 platforms, plus others, are attempting to remain relevant from a Web 2.0 era to a Web 3.0 era, and we're already well underway. So what other things have I come upon? There's so many things out there, and I know I'm going to miss something. I'm only going to give a couple quick ones, and we'll just hit this at the treetops. In no particular order, I'm on board with a platform called Lynx, Lynx, which is meant to help business people through matchmaking, getting support that they need. So Lynx. I also believe Economic Impact Catalyst, or the EIC, is a great platform, especially if you are in a metro area and you're attempting to connect all the dots of all the resources to help businesses, help startups. EIC, Economic Impact Catalyst. So I'm involved with both of those. I also have onboarded to a Web 3.0 platform called Iris, which looks a little bit and acts a little bit like Twitter, or now X, but is still not the same because it's decentralized protocol. And then another one is Pick My Brain. So you have knowledge in your head. Napoleon Hill taught us in 1937 that you can monetize that. Pick My Brain says set up a profile and let people pick your brain. They can do it on a freemium level for a short amount of time, and then after that is now when you can make some dollars, because you're producing value, you're transmuting something that will help someone else. And Pick My Brain, of course, just like Uber and Airbnb and all the others, takes a percentage of that because they too are practicing matchmaker economics.
Absolutely.
So those
And
are
I'm actually
those
familiar
are a
with that
handful
one.
more. So
yeah, that's a good one. I was looking at that one just the other day going, I may have to participate in that one too. That one looked really interesting. One that I just talked to the owner, Nick Wise, is he's doing, it's reach-influencers.com. So he's trying to bring the influencers together with those that are looking for influencers. So the small business owners, right? You may not be able to sign yourself a big NFL player, right? But there's nothing saying that you couldn't find yourself an influencer that's in a smaller market that might be perfect for what you're looking for. So that's another one of those matchmaking, bringing people together, the business owners that are looking for influencers along with the influencers.
Well, the influencer world is still very much out there. I see as part of the future, not your grandmother's version of entrepreneurship, I see that there is a very thriving gig economy, putting aside the cynics and the unhealthy skeptics that incorrectly brand it as some sort of exploitative thing. It's only exploitative if both parties aren't winning in some way, right?
Right.
And there's always going to be some level of exploitation in everything because the human condition is so flawed, right? So that is the first thing that I wanted to point out, right? Then, of course, you have the creator economy. Let's reward people who are creative. They're artists, they're musicians, they are really good at writing copy.
Well, so don't get me down
Let's
that
reward
path,
them.
because I'm gonna do a plug now, SJ. You open the door. So the creatives, we have no more starving artists.art. So or no MOSA. And that whole goal is to pair up the business owners that have blank walls and maybe don't want your Walmart art on it and want something to support the community with the artists in the local community so that they can actually have that income coming back and forth supporting the arts. So I'm going to throw that plug in there, right? Is that something you would like to be involved in?
Wait a minute. Are you telling me, Christine, that you know this certain fellow named Oz by chance?
Perhaps I might even be a business partner. Why? That entrepreneur thing.
I think I might know this fellow.
Oh, if you've met Oz, you know Oz. You can't mistake him for anyone else, and he is a personality and a force to be reckoned with.
I, of course, have to play mildly coy there, but I can't completely maintain a poker face. I do know him well, and he deserves the plug because one of the things that I learned in the liberal arts was arts, just like the hard sciences, just like the humanities, just like the social sciences, they all connect. Knowledge is all connected by golden threads, and there's a singularity out there. However, people who were thinking from the agricultural or the industrial age would constantly denigrate and look down upon these people that had courses to study in the arts and say, well, how are you going to get a job with that?
Right.
That is one of the worst questions that you can ever ask. Creatives create and you can monetize it. But to Oz's point with that concept, it's making sure that on the process of scaling up, you can do the basics from Maslow. You don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. You don't have to go into debt to the banking system. You don't have to give up on your creator economy passion project just because, and then go work at a place that you cannot stand, right?
Right.
You know, some warehouse or something. So, bottom line is, kudos to Mr. Oz. I'm a fan of the gig economy. I'm a fan of the creator economy. I think influencers have their role. And again, obviously, matchmaker economics and multi-sided platforms is a real thing. So I like them all.
And really, if we shift our mindset towards this entrepreneurship, right? Is it the idea that art has no value because it has no monetary? How does that even, right? Is that practical, right? We need to get beyond that, because as a society, if we're only thinking about art as commercial art, okay, you can make money if you are designing the candy wrapper for somebody, but you don't have any appreciation for the art on your wall. Really, art is all around us, right? So appreciating that. I always say, imagine life going with blank walls. Everywhere you went, plain white walls. It's like, oh, right.
Yeah.
It has value. It does. And so we need to find a way to make that valuable through our society, every part of it, right? Everybody's got a skill. We have skills, we have talents, and that's kind of one of my favorite places to play is helping people draw out their inner talents and their skills. My belief is everybody has a God-given gift, and
Yes.
are you using it to fulfill your purpose? And part of your purpose is making the world a better place in some way, shape, or form.
Whether your audience or you, Christine, are familiar with the hedgehog concept from Jim Collins, or whether you're familiar
Did you
with
call it the
Ikigai,
hedgehog concept?
it's called the hedgehog concept, Jim Collins.
All right, I'm writing it down.
Okay. Because of time, I won't get into that too deeply, but I'll give that as a trailer to the movie. There's something you can look up and get familiar with. Anyone. Also, Ikigai, right? We need to stop leaving all of these latent skills, these latent gift sets, these experiences, these dreams and desires. We need to stop putting them aside and falling into that industrial age mentality of we have to pay the bills, we have to make the donuts, because number one, that will grind you down. And we've heard enough about mental health the last 3 to 5 years. We don't need to make it worse.
Right.
Number two, we need to tap into these latent things and stop leaving them on the table. Monetization is absolutely possible for pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as long as there's a win-win, as long as free enterprise happens, the exchange makes two people pleased at the result. It's all that matters, and in the grand scheme of things. Okay. Adam Smith taught us in The Wealth of Nations when he wrote that must-read book. Adam Smith taught us that there's a division of labor in any society. Some people will choose to do things that are more physical science-based, like medicine, like engineering, things like that. Fantastic. We need those people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are very creative, very artistic. Humanities, we should lean into them. Some people like me, I loved and still love the social sciences, macroeconomics. I deeply love history, philosophy. I could talk about philosophy all day. Social sciences. So all of those things, humanities, social sciences, physical sciences, arts, need to be equally valued. We need to stop leaving things on the table. We need to stop using an old grandfather and grandmother's version of entrepreneurship, or worse yet, some sort of academic model, which is all theory and no results, all hat, no cattle, let alone some sort of corporate thing or governmental thing, which drains all the humanity out of us just to produce some piece of paper or something. People will work in all those parts of the economy and they're needed, but we don't want to strangle the other parts at the expense of what we might be doing or what we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, don't denigrate what you don't understand. Either learn about it or let it alone. So
absolutely,
there I am. I'm on my soapbox a little bit.
I love your soapbox. Make room for me up there. I'm just saying, right? This whole idea of the future, the futurepreneur, think outside the box. Let's let go of some of those old rules and let's recreate what we think the society can be like. Let's do some good in the world. Let's connect. Let's help. Let's be that serial entrepreneur with multiple hands and pots, right? Don't stay in your lane, by golly. Break the lanes.
Well, see, we were led to believe, going back to when we were all kids, the vast majority of us, we were all led to believe that we needed to fit in. Mm-hmm. Now, there is some biological imperative to that. I understand that people would rather fit in than feel like they're on the outside of the glass, right? Don't get me wrong. I went through that stuff like anyone else. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to futurism, futurepreneur, when it comes to the creator economy, when it comes to gigging it, there's plenty of room for all of us at the table. The marketplace table is always growing. It's not a zero-sum game. Mm-hmm. Even in really bad economies, cool concepts pop up. I happen to be part of a global community. It's a membership platform called the 8-7 Network. Okay.
Mhm.
That's where I met this gentleman named Oz that we were talking about a few minutes ago. That platform was started, and if you know your history, I'll give you a little secret to your audience and to you, perhaps, Christine. That platform was started in 2008, and I think we all know 2008 was not really a good year for the economy.
Mhm.
There's always people that say, you know what, the economy's not good. What do I have to lose, right? Let's do something different. Take the lemons and let's create lemonade. You've heard that one a million times, right?
Mhm.
So, case in point, I'm not able to get into this too detailed today, but there's a really cool thing from Statista, Statista. Great thing to subscribe to. They said that over the period 1994 to early 2022, the trend line for new business establishments or startups constantly was going up with a few plateaus here and there. And over the last several years, the cynics and the skeptics who said entrepreneurship would die during the COVID era or was going to be ground down and slowed down to imperceptibility or something, they couldn't have been more wrong.
Right.
Because over the last several years, there have been more startups or new establishments than pretty much ever before.
Absolutely.
Because,
In a time where you're
you
backed
know,
into a corner, right?
yes,
Americans are pretty industrious. So the whole idea of being creative and being like, I'm not going to starve. My family's not going to starve. I will figure out a way to make this work. Right.
yes. And even in other parts of the world too, on the other 5 populated continents. My apologies to the penguins and seals in Antarctica, but on the other 5 populated continents, there was even their own movements to some degree too. It's like, hey, if you're locking me into my house or restricting my movement or whatever, I can still do stuff because the internet's there, for example.
Mhm.
The apps are still there. You know, I have a book that I've been wanting to write for 10 years. I have a screenplay I want to write, and I think this screenplay is going to make a big difference once someone procures it. So bottom line is, there's always something you can do to add value, and you need to take kinetic energy, kinesthetic, get out there and do it. Don't fear failure. You're going to
Mhm.
fail. The human condition is what it is. Some of the stuff I've been involved in hasn't always worked out since 2010 when I met my mentor. But guess what? I'm still standing. So
And we learn and we grow and we take those skills and talents and experience with us to the next project that we work on. But don't stop dreaming, right? There's so many possibilities.
dreaming could be said, I think I heard this once. I think I'm getting it right, capturing the essence of it. Dreaming is the first step in making something, and the second step is actually making it. You've already made it in the dream, right? I have this new shoe concept. I have this new way to, I have the motorized carriage of the 2020s, right? Which I guess one might call the Cybertruck with Tesla, that maybe, right? But anyway, you dream it, you do it. There's a dream, struggle, victory continuum, and it's really invigorating. It's very empowering. It's very edifying. It's very encouraging because it's entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. SJ, you are an absolute delight. I love having you on the show and talking about my favorite topic, entrepreneurship and just being the best version of yourself. So if people want to reach out to you, for those of that aren't watching the video, maybe are listening to it on audio instead, tell them how to connect with you. What's the best way to connect with you, SJ?
The best way is I have pretty much parked myself on one legacy social media platform. So I'm on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
if you look up SJ, which is my name, last name is Barakony, it's Hungarian. As long as you can spell it at least half right, you find it. That's the best way. I have a couple of LinkedIn pages that I'm affiliated with, so you might find me on the page first. You know, I also have a digital platform scheduler that I'm happy to provide to Christine as part of notes or whatever. I have email addresses. So
I'm going to
I'm not.
drop your LinkedIn link into the chat. So take a look and you can connect with him that way. Also click that link and make a friend and say, hey, the Diva sent me. Right. And
Yeah. Yeah. So any of those ways, starting with LinkedIn, are always to reach me. And again, while I'm not on a lot of the Web 2.0 platforms, that's by choice because I said I'm going to exit these and I'm going to wait for the Web 3.0 ones. And again, I'm keeping an eye on them. Iris is one of them. So
as I said, you
anyway,
gave us the list of where to go find you. So if you want to stalk SJ, it's one of my favorite pastimes. You can go find him on a couple of different platforms. Let's see, you said Links, EIC, Iris, and Pick My Brain were some of the places you're playing at, right?
that is right.
Go stalk him, go find him. If this is somebody you want to connect with, why? He's a super connector. So come with that giving heart and how you can give. Are you looking for anything in particular at the moment that our audience can help you with, SJ?
Well, since I also consider myself, and I almost forgot to mention it, but here we are as we wrap up. Another thing I like to say is I like a lot of E words. So I mentioned encouraging, edifying, empowering, etc. But I forgot one, evangelist. I like to say I'm a startup evangelist. So connections to startups in their first phase or two are always appreciated because the pick my brain concept, the links concept, these are ways I can be valuable, right? Through my ties for 8 years with H7 Network, with my B2B network, lots of podcasts I've been on prior to today, I can be of help to startups. Also, where do you find a lot of startups? Not exclusively, but you find them in incubators. You find them in accelerators. You find them hanging out at co-working facilities, either in the open space or maybe they get an office. Connections into any of those three types of facilities, or even entrepreneurial centers, for example. Any of those facilities are great too. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's other connections you think I can maybe be of value to, feel free to ask me in the form of a question, and I will use my Jeopardy skill to address it.
You are such a joy, SJ. Thank you so much for coming on to play with us today. Maybe we'll have you come back and play again soon because you are a wealth of knowledge. And I don't think there's a topic we could pick out of the sky that you wouldn't be educated, know about, and have an opinion.
It would be a challenge. It might be a fun challenge. It's like, does he know anything about opera? But
Don't tempt
see,
me.
let me quote this one last thing, because as you can see, I do bring some pop culture in here because it's a part of pretty much everyone. So I'll leave you with this one final thought should be. It's a small scene in the original Die Hard, which, by the way, I will argue with you and win that it's a Christmas movie. Okay. In the original Die Hard, in the OG, there's a small scene for about less than 30 seconds where Hans Gruber, played by the late, great Alan Rickman, said these words. He said, benefits of a classical education. When you are deeply and richly educated, folks, the world is your oyster. When you get too narrow, or you don't open your horizons, don't take off the blinders, you miss a lot of the world. Benefits of a classical education.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christine, for the opportunity.
Thank you, SJ. We'll see you again soon, buddy. Thank you so much. And that's it for another episode of DFW Networking Diva with Christine Deane, connecting you to who you want to know, what you want to know, those resources and those people. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this. We'll have SJ back again, and we will see you again next time. Thank you so much for joining us today.